What if I told you that all across North America, there are subway systems that sit abandoned or are planned and never built? Crazy, right? Well, this is what we're going to be talking about today, so listen up. Every day, millions of North Americans sit in traffic. We crawl through 6-lane highways, choked by bottlenecks, surrounded by a sea of metal and exhaust. And for many of us, that's just the way it is. Cars, after all, are how our cities were built, right? But what if I told you that there's another story? One not about the freeways we built, but about the underground worlds we never did. From coast to coast, cities once dreamed of subways that could have connected neighborhoods, spurred dense development, slashed emissions, and changed the way that we live today. Some were partially built, then abandoned. Some were proposed and approved, only to be cancelled by politics, funding cuts, or shifting priorities. In this series, we're going to uncover the forgotten blueprints of North America's lost rapid transit systems. These are the ghost lines, the systems that could have redefined mobility, and in many ways, they still haunt our cities today. Because, had these systems been built, North America might have looked very, very different today. While Europe and Asia doubled down on rail, North America doubled down on rubber tires and gasoline, but it didn't have to be this way. From the post-war boom to the age of the automobile, priorities shifted. We subsidized sprawl, we paved over neighborhoods, and we chose short-term growth over long-term connectivity. But beneath the streets of major cities, big and small, like LA, New York, and Toronto, clues remain. Ghost tunnels, sealed entrances, and forgotten stations. So, let's dig into the untold past of North America's urban future that never was. We begin in Philadelphia. Before New York became the king of subways, before Toronto laid its first track, Philadelphia was a pioneer. This is the second American city to open a subway, not Chicago, not Boston, but Philly. By 1928, the city had its second line, the Broad Street Subway, stretching down Philadelphia's dense spine. Planners envisioned a full network, one that could rival New York, but what we got was just a glimpse of what could have been. If you've ever ridden the Broad Street line, you know it ends rather abruptly at Patterson Avenue, just 4 stops south of City Hall. But here's what you might not know. This was never meant to be the end, not even close. Back in the 1990s, and again in the early 2000s, the city proposed extending the subway line all the way down to Navy Yard. The extension would have connected thousands of new jobs, developments, and event venues directly to the subway. The idea made sense. The land was already city-owned, and the Navy Yard was transforming from a post-industrial relic to a modern commercial hub. There were even talks of using the abandoned tracks built decades earlier. Yes, some of the infrastructure was already there, and the city once built a spur track under the assumption that the line would be extended. But, alas, it never happened. Over the years, feasibility studies were written, public interest came and went. Even as Philly's Navy Yard boomed with new life, the subway sat frozen in time. And why not build it? Well, the simple answer is money, and the more complex answer are priorities. While roads were widened, buses rerouted, and parking lots paved, the subway was treated like a relic. And it's not just South Philly that lost out. Go north on the Broad Street line and you hit Olney. End of the line. But in the 1970s, Philadelphia transit planners dreamed of taking the subway all the way to Cheltenham. To this day, maps from that era show a proposed extension to the suburbs, designed to connect North Philly to the rapidly growing areas just outside the city. But suburban rail politics got in the way. Extending the subway into the suburban north was unpopular with local politicians. They wanted commuter rail, not intercity rapid transit. And so, the Broad Street dreams stopped short once again. Meanwhile, tens of millions were poured into the Vine Street Expressway, a highway carved through neighborhoods once promised subway connections. In the mid-20th century, this became a pattern in Philly. Highways went in, subways got shelved. The Roosevelt Boulevard subway was another casualty. If you've ever driven down Roosevelt Boulevard, you know it's one of the most dangerous roads in America. 12 lanes of traffic, dozens of deaths. And every few years, somebody suggests the same idea. Yes, since 1913, Philadelphia has studied building a subway underneath Roosevelt Boulevard. Today, it would connect over 100,000 people daily, more than some entire US subway systems carry. But after over 100 years of proposals, it still doesn't exist. Philadelphia could have had a network, a truly regional subway system. It had the density, the ridership, the urban form, but what it didn't have was the follow-through. Today, the city runs on a skeleton of what was once planned, and while cities like London, Seoul, and Madrid built out full metro systems over the last century, Philadelphia stayed frozen, a museum of what could have been. And yet, even now, the dreams haven't died, because every time another plan resurfaces, every time someone dares to ask, what if, the ghost of Philadelphia's lost subway system flickers back to life. Up next, Toronto, Canada's unrealized subway empire. So, Toronto is Canada's largest city, a place where subway expansion has always lagged just behind the city's ambitions. Today, the TTC, which is Toronto Transit Commission, moves nearly 1.7 million riders a day. It's the third largest transit system in North America by ridership, but if you look under the surface, Toronto is a city filled with ghost lines, forgotten corridors, dreams of subways that almost existed. What if I told you that the Spadina line was almost underground the entire way to York University, 20 years earlier than it was? What if I told you that there was once a plan to build a Queen subway line, first promised in 1911, that came inches away from happening, not once, not twice, but 5 separate times, and was cancelled every single time? This is the story of Toronto's unbuilt subway empire. So let's rewind to the 1940s. Toronto's population is booming, streetcars are reaching their limits, and a bold new report is published, the TTC Rapid Transit Expansion Study. It recommends not just one subway line under Yonge Street, but 2 more, under Queen and 1 under Bloor. The city opts to build Yonge first, and it opens in 1954, but the Queen line is right behind it. Designs are drawn, land is acquired, and utilities are relocated. There's even a tunnel started under Queen and Yonge, which still exists today, hidden behind locked doors in Queen Station. But then, disaster. The city delays it, then rethinks it, then the Bloor Danforth corridor takes priority, and just like that, the Queen subway is shelved. But here's the thing, Toronto didn't just kill the Queen line once. It was resurrected back in 1960 and planned to run from Roncesvalles to Greenwood. But it dies. It comes back again in 1968, only 8 years later, as the Queen Street subway, stretching from Humber Loop to Victoria Park, and even appears on TTC planning maps. But it's shelved again. In 1972, it becomes part of the Grand Streetcar Subway Plan, with low-floor light rail running under Queen and King Streets. Cancelled. By 1985, a new concept emerges, the Downtown Relief Line. This time, it's more urgent. The Yonge line is overloaded, the city is swelling, and the Queen corridor is once again considered. But as always, no shovels even hit the ground. So, in total, more than 7 distinct Queen or Relief subway alignments were proposed between 1944 and 2010. All of them cancelled. Every single one. And yet, Queen Street Station still hides its past. The ghost platform underneath, built in the 1950s for a line that never came. Remnants untouched, unused. Imagine if even one of these lines had been built. Toronto might have avoided decades of crushing congestion on Line 1. It might have saved billions in retrofits and bypass projects like the Ontario line, which ironically follows a similar path, but diverges once it crosses the DVP, the Don Valley Parkway. But the Queen line isn't the only ghost. Let's talk about the Spadina Express subway. Back in 1974, the TTC wanted to extend the Spadina line to York University, a bold idea at the time. The original proposal? A fully underground route with express service north from St. George to Finch. Multiple alignments were drawn. One even had a fork at Eglinton West, splitting into 2 northern branches. But political fighting, budget cuts, and shifting priorities meant that this project got scaled down. The Spadina extension finally opened in 1996, and it was a fraction of what we had planned. And when it reached Vaughan in 2017, most of it ran above ground and cheaper. Yes, but slower, less reliable, and less resilient to snow and ice, which are major problems in the Greater Toronto Area. So, another forgotten corridor in Toronto, the Front Street Subway. In 1993, the TTC considered a west to east line running underneath Front Street, from Union Station to Liberty Village and beyond. Designed to serve the booming waterfront and exhibition grounds, it was studied, modeled, and priced. But yet again, the province pulled funding. Then, there's the Eglinton West Subway, proposed in the late 1980s and funded by the Harris government in the 90s, and cancelled just days after the tunnel boring had begun. Literally, equipment was in place, tunnels were started, and then cancelled. The ironic bit? The same corridor became the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, but only 25 years later, and is still unfinished at the time of this video. Toronto. Today, it's a city of 3 million and growing fast, but its subway network, just 4 lines. Compare that to any major European city or even Montreal, cities with similar populations and larger subway systems. The difference? Those cities built what they had planned. Toronto dreamed, Toronto designed, but Toronto delayed. And that's the legacy of its lost subway system. A collection of ghost lines beneath our feet, buried under asphalt and ambition. So now, we're going to Rochester, New York, and don't forget, if you like what you see, take this moment now to subscribe, like, and leave a comment down below if you like our exploration together. Now back to the video. Rochester, New York. Once called the Flower City, later the Photo City, today it's known for something else entirely, being the smallest city in the United States to ever operate a fully fledged subway system. And not just a streetcar tunnel, a real, grade-separated underground electric railway with stations, signals, and scheduled trains. But here's the twist. Rochester didn't just lose its subway. It buried it twice. To understand Rochester's lost subway system, we have to go back to the Erie Canal. In the early 20th century, New York State rerouted the canal to bypass downtown Rochester, leaving behind a massive empty trench slicing through the city core. Most cities would have filled it in. Rochester, it had bigger plans. By 1918, engineers had begun converting the abandoned canal bed into a subway. A clever reuse, a cheap pre-dug right-of-way. Within a few years, tracks were laid, bridges rebuilt, and stations constructed. And in 1927, the Rochester Industrial and Rapid Transit Railway opened. At its peak, the Rochester subway stretched 7 miles with 11 stations, served both passengers and freight. Streetcars connected to it from the suburbs, Kodak used it to move film reels, even General Motors shipped auto parts through it. And it was fast, it was efficient, and it was futuristic for the time. But it was also doomed, because as early as the 1940s, the city began tunneling away from rail. Ridership dropped, suburbanization exploded, and in 1956, just 29 years after opening, the subway was shut down. But unlike most American streetcars, Rochester didn't rip out the tracks and pave it over. They left it for decades. This tunnel stayed intact. The stations, graffiti covered, waterlogged, remained like a post-apocalyptic time capsule beneath the streets. Urban explorers wandered the platforms. Taggers painted murals, and every few years a new proposal surfaced to bring it back, because Rochester never fully let go. In 1968, a plan was floated to reuse the tunnel for a busway, the first in the US. It didn't happen. In 1974, the city considered restoring light rail service from Amtrak Station to Monroe Avenue. Too expensive. In 1990, planners proposed an intermodal corridor linking buses, bikes, and commuter trains inside the tunnel. Rejected. Then, in the early 2000s, public support swelled again. Petitions, newspaper op-eds, even business support to reuse the subway tunnel. Some wanted a new light rail system. Others imagined shops and cafes underground. One group proposed a museum. Another wanted to turn into a greenway, a linear park for bikes and walkers. But nothing happened. And then, in 2011, it all came to an end. The city, citing maintenance costs and safety concerns, began demolishing the tunnel. They filled in massive sections of it, capped others with concrete. They destroyed one of the last intact subway tunnels in America. Today, all that remains is a short, sealed-off section under Broad Street, still soaked with history, still echoing with graffiti and dust. What makes Rochester subway different isn't that it was just short-lived. It's that it could have returned. It wasn't just a relic. It was a viable, ready-made transit corridor that the city walked away from. And in doing so, it erased one of the most unique chapters in North American transit history. Imagine if Rochester had saved its subway. Maybe today it would be a transit-forward city like Portland or Minneapolis. Maybe it would be the smallest American city with a functional light rail line. Maybe it would be remembered not as a footnote, but as a blueprint. Instead, it's a cautionary tale. The story of a subway system that was too early for its time and too easy to forget. Unlike Cincinnati, on the other hand, Cincinnati, Ohio, a city built on hills and ambition, and buried beneath its street lies the largest unused subway system in North America. And that's not an exaggeration. It's not just an urban legend, but beneath the pavement, under city parks, roads, and quiet neighborhoods, there's a real subway. Tunnels, platforms, and even tracks, but not a single train has ever run through them. Because Cincinnati didn't just plan a subway, it dug one, and then abandoned it. The story starts in 1916. Like many American cities, Cincinnati was choking on congestion. The streetcar network was vast but slow. Traffic clogged the narrow downtown streets, and the city's geography, steep hills, winding riverbanks, and valley neighborhoods make any expansion difficult. But Cincinnati had a plan. A bold, forward-thinking 16-mile rapid transit loop. A full-blown subway. Not elevated like New York, not a bus tunnel like Seattle, but a full, true underground electric railway. Voters approved it in a landslide. Construction began in 1920, and by 1927, the city had dug over 2 miles of twin tunnels, built 4 major stations, laid track, poured concrete stairwells, and installed ventilation shafts. It was over halfway done, and then everything collapsed. The 1920s brought soaring costs and shrinking funds. What was supposed to cost $6 million ballooned to nearly double that. World War I had inflated material prices, and new city leaders questioned the subway's relevance. And then, the Great Depression loomed on the horizon. By the time the dust settled, Cincinnati was broke, and the subway sat in limbo. Decade after decade, the tunnels sat idle, dry, structurally sound, perfectly preserved, a subterranean monument to unfinished ambition. Locals whispered about it. Some didn't believe it was real, and yet, there it was, a hollow city beneath the real one. In the 1940s, there was a new proposal, converted to a truck freight route. In the 1960s, planners pitched light rail. In the 1970s, the tunnels nearly became a nuclear fallout shelter. But no train ever ran. Not a single revenue passenger ever stepped onto those ghost platforms. And still, the tunnel waits. It runs beneath Central Parkway, under Brighton, past the old canal route, and directly beneath some of the city's busiest intersections. In 2002, Cincinnati seriously considered reviving it. A modern streetcar line would have used portions of the tunnel as a shortcut through the city core. But once again, the plans were scrapped. Some wanted a busway, others proposed turning it into a bike trail. One group pitched a mixed-use underground marketplace, but each time, the cost, the risk, and the politics got into the way. What's astonishing is just how complete it is. This isn't just a stub, it's a working subway in every way except one. It's never been used. If completed, Cincinnati would have been the first American city between the coasts to operate a fully underground rapid transit system. It would have rivaled Boston. It would have been finished a full decade before the DC Metro or Atlanta's. Instead, Cincinnati became something else. The city with the biggest, most expensive ghost subway in America. Today, parts of the tunnels are used for water mains. Other sections have been sealed off and left to rot. Every few years, guided tours reopen briefly. Flashlights sweep across the crumbling platforms, old ceramic tiles, and rusted rail beds. You can almost hear the sound of a ghost train pulling in. And then, silence. Cincinnati subway wasn't lost to war or destroyed by cars. It was stopped by indecision, delay, and cost. It was America's first great transit what if, a system so close to being finished, it still haunts the city to this day. What would Cincinnati look like today if its subway system had opened? Would it have spurred smart growth, transit villages, a regional rail network, or would it still have been abandoned just on a later timeline? One thing's certain, no other city in North America built so much of a subway for so long that never carried a single rider. It's not just a subway lost to time, it's a vision that got left behind. 4 cities, 4 visions, 4 stories of ambition, disruption, and abandonment. From Philadelphia's shattered dreams of a transit empire, to Toronto's Cold War secrets under the downtown core, to Rochester's once busy rail line built underneath parking lots, to Cincinnati's fully built, never used subway lying silent under a modern city. Each of them had a chance. Each of them came close, and each of them fell just short of becoming something transformative. These aren't just transit trivia, they're time capsules. They tell us something real and something haunting about how we build, how we dream, and how quickly we forget. They remind us that cities are full of layers, physical ones like tunnels beneath sidewalks, but also historical ones, layers of ambition, delay, politics, war, and compromise. And if you peel back those layers far enough, you'll find stories that feel strangely familiar. Because every city still wrestles with these questions. What kind of future are we building? And what kind of past are we paving over? In a way, these lost subways are mirrors. They reflect what could have been, a version of North America where transit led the way, where cities doubled down on rail and tunneled through the hard parts. But instead, we turned away. We defunded, we delayed, we dismantled, and in many cases, we forgot. Until now. There's something strangely compelling about these places. They're not just urban curiosities, they're stories of decisions deferred, ideas entombed, futures that never came to be. Maybe that's why I find this topic so fascinating. It's a mix of transit, history, and the thrill of exploring the almost. The maps that never came true, the stations that were built and sealed, the systems we planned and buried. These stories don't just live in old newspapers or blueprints, they live underground. And sometimes they're still waiting down there in the dark. Cities evolve, that's what they do, but every once in a while they leave behind pieces of themselves, places that didn't quite fit, didn't finish, didn't quite survive, and if we're willing to look, to really look, we can still find those pieces. They're under our feet, they're in the quiet parts of old neighborhoods, in the busy part of new neighborhoods, behind locked doors, under layers of concrete, asphalt, and time. This video covered just a few of these stories, but there are so many more. Boston has an entire abandoned platform system hidden in plain sight. Detroit's never built people movers expansion. Los Angeles almost built a full-scale metro in the 1920s. Vancouver's unrealized 1950 SkyTrain predecessors, and Mexico City, a system designed to be the biggest in the hemisphere, but with scars from what was lost and delayed. So, if you enjoy this journey into this hidden history of North America's lost subway systems, let me know down in the comments below, and there might be a part 2 on the horizon. Anyways, this channel has always been about more than just trains and roads. It's about the stories buried beneath them, about the forgotten corners of infrastructure, about what cities dreamed of becoming and what stopped them. It's also a personal obsession. I spent hours reading 100-year-old planning documents, staring at maps of ghost stations, and crawling through transit history forums at 2 a.m. There's just something about these stories, the mix of mystery, momentum, and missed opportunity that feels deeply human. And I hope, in some way, it resonates with you too. So, thanks for watching. This has been Coffee and Transport, and I hope I'll see you next time.